Hello everyone, welcome to CYBR603 Integrated Systems Architecture, where we're jumping into Learning Activity 10 and we're going to look at operations views. These are going to be shorter lectures this week because, the operation views and the project views are a little less intensive in terms of what we have to cover. So these should be fairly short lectures, but I think that'll work in our favor because we do have a lot of artifacts that are starting to stack up. So we've of course got our all views, our capability views. We've got our div1 data view, and then of course we have two other views that we have to create this week, which is our OV1, our ops view 1, and then we also have to create a PV1. So we got a few things to create, and luckily this should give you a little bit of breathing room this week because we are going to have some shorter lectures. So without further ado, let me blast through these. We'll talk about the OV1 for Learning Activity 10, and then we'll talk about the project PV1 view in Learning Activity 11. Okay, so what we have up for this view is an operations view. So operations views in general are they depict what as it says is operations at various levels, but it's an operational view of the current state you intend to develop. So the idea is to project into the future what it is that you're trying to depict, or abstract from a high level what's existing today that you're augmenting. But in our case, an OV provides a high-level overview of the organization's capabilities and any functions that are associated with that. Also gets into any linkages between the system. So it's one of those things that if there's a node, or if there are objects, there's people, places, or things, those things have to be depicted and abstracted at a very high level. What is different about an OV operations views from other views in the DODAF architecture is that op views have an unusually high level of abstraction. And that's because you just can't depict everything that's going on. Service views and system views, they go into a lot more detail. They actually have more levels to them as well, a lot of different viewpoints. So that's why operation views are really good for executive audiences, good for business audiences, the kind of your non-tech audiences. So don't lose sight of that when you're creating this from a themes perspective. So there are many levels. Operations views, it looks kind of complicated when you look at all of them. They're kind of moderately complicated. I'd say that as far as DODAF, probably the most complicated framework within DODAF is the system views or the system viewpoints. Those are quite a bit more complicated, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But for now, operations views, they're kind of moderately complex in the sense that we've got 6 levels and 9 viewpoints, and they describe things from all different levels. So you got your operational concept at the OV1, organizational and resource view at the OV2, activities and resources getting layered into that in OV3, and the relationships and the activity hierarchies and the operational activities, and see where this goes. But they get into increasing detail. For our purposes, we're going to just be sticking to an OV1. We're not going to be doing anything outside of developing, refining an operational view of what it is that we're doing outside of the OV1. So what is an OV1? Well, it's typically it's a enterprise level view of what it is you're trying to develop and or trying to augment. And it depicts any type of high level mission goals, any type of stakeholders that might be involved. Now, these aren't executive stakeholders. These are, I would call these stakeholders that are involved in the operational view of the world. So you probably typically aren't going to see like a CEO in there, right? That's going to be something, that's too low level for an OV1. You might see something where it's like executive leadership, or something like executive command or command and control, or you might have these higher level models within your OV1 that represent an executive chain, but you wouldn't necessarily go out and say, hey, here's a CEO at that level. So high level concept graphic, right? We're keeping it high level. That's what an OV1 is. Another thing you probably wouldn't do is show every F-35 in the fleet or every airplane in a fleet. You would probably, just isolate it down to one airplane in a given situation with a couple people involved and the high level components of the architecture. That's really what the OV1 is. It's just meant to be a very high level depiction of what it is you're trying to develop or augment. Okay, so here are the things that are represented in an OV1. Typically, you've got a title block, and I've got some examples I'll show you here, but title block, scope and context, just a high level of view of what the activity looks like, and any like high level relationships that exist. An OV1 also should identify any like high level nodes, and when we talk about nodes, we're talking about like platforms, organizations, or other locations, or important. They could be important organizational features that you want to highlight as well. And I think one of the biggest aspects of an OV1 in general is the idea to be able to paint a picture of the scenario under question. So you've got a project and you've got a new widget. Well, your operational view needs to be able to accommodate that widget for a high level audience. So you have to really think of it almost in like cartoon fashion, like a comic booky kind of thing, where it's if I gave you a mission and I said, look, you have to explain your really complicated project to somebody, and oh, by the way, it's a bunch of executives and not a bunch of technical people. And even if it was a bunch of technical people, you're introducing them to the project for the first time. What kind of graphic would you create that depicts your project? Right? That's something you got to think about. It's something that is important for what it is that we do. Okay, here's an example of an OV1. There's two. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, that's pretty basic, to a more complicated OV1 in the lower left-hand corner. I highly recommend for anyone that's involved with any of this that you go out, you look for OV1s on the internet. There's plenty of OV1s that exist out there, and yeah, I would just go check that out. That's probably the easiest way to do that. Okay, next up, let's recap. OV1 provides high-level overview of the enterprise operational activities and how the high-level connections occur within those operational activities. And like I said before, it's a useful tool for communicating the high-level operational concepts to stakeholders involved in the project. And again, these are strategic high-level perspectives. They don't get into the weeds. So OV1s are very good for communicating to broad audiences. That's the key here. OV1s are great for usage to communicate your idea to broad audiences. Okay, I think that's all I've got for OV1s. I told you I'd be pretty quick on these lectures for this week. So that wraps up Learning Activity 10 about OV1s. You do have an OV1 that's coming up and due this week. You also have a Div 1 that was due last week. Don't let these stack up because this kind of gets kind of out of hand here in the next couple of weeks because we just have something due every week here. So make sure you're keeping up with that. Also, make sure you're keeping up with your readings. In this particular case, I want you to read 329 through 345 in your DODAF V2.02 Volume 2. With that said, I will see you in Learning Activity 11.